Have you ever pondered whether the MAGA movement aligns with the teachings of Jesus? This question invites us to delve into an engrossing exploration of the MAGA movement, its genesis, and its relationship with Christianity. The MAGA movement, an acronym for Make America Great Again, was born out of a political campaign slogan. This phrase, popularized by Donald Trump in his 2016 presidential campaign, promised to restore a perceived lost greatness to America. But what did this greatness entail? It's a question that has sparked countless debates and discussions. The movement quickly gained traction, with Trump at the helm. His charismatic personality and bold promises appealed to a particular demographic, mainly white, conservative, middle-class Americans who felt marginalized by the changing cultural and economic landscape. This demographic, many of whom identify as evangelical Christians, saw and see in Trump a leader who echoes their anxieties and aspirations. Trump's campaign, and later his presidency, promised to restore jobs, tighten immigration, and uphold conservative values. These promises, though politically divisive, resonate with many Americans who feel their way of life is under threat. Thus, the MAGA movement is not merely about a political agenda, it is about preserving an identity, a way of life. As the movement grew, so did its influence, reaching far beyond the realm of politics. Notably, figures like Sean Moon and Robert Jeffress, controversial religious leaders, became associated with the MAGA movement, further solidifying its appeal among certain religious communities. The MAGA movement, however, is not just a political phenomenon, it is a cultural one as well. It taps into a deep-seated sense of identity and belonging. For many of its followers, MAGA isn't just about making America great again, it's about reclaiming a sense of lost identity and purpose. As the movement gained momentum, the intertwining of MAGA and Christian values became increasingly apparent. But does this intertwining align with the teachings of Jesus? That's the question we'll be exploring next. Religion, particularly Christianity, has played a significant role in the MAGA movement. The appeal of MAGA to the Christian right is not a mere coincidence. It is a strategic fusion of political power and religious identity, and it's worth our attention. The Christian right, especially white evangelicals, has found a champion in the MAGA movement. MAGA leaders are often portrayed as defenders of Christian values, promising to fight against perceived threats to religious liberty. This claim to be the guardians of faith is further emphasized with the incorporation of Christian symbolism into their rhetoric, painting a compelling picture for those feeling threatened by societal changes. But let's delve deeper. At the core of MAGA's religious appeal is the concept of Christian nationalism. Now, what is Christian nationalism? It's a political ideology that merges American and far-right Christian identities. It seeks to establish a theocratic Christian nation where conservative Christians hold power. In this vision, the line between patriotism and faith becomes blurred, and being a true American becomes synonymous with being a true Christian. This blend of faith and politics is not new. However, the MAGA movement has taken it to a new level, resulting in a potent mix of religious fervor and political zeal. This fusion has been so effective that some MAGA proponents have even gone to the extent of drawing comparisons between their leaders and Jesus, an act that has sparked controversy and debate. Moreover, MAGA's religious undertone has found fertile ground in churches and religious communities across the country. Prominent pastors and religious leaders have been seen endorsing MAGA, further solidifying its religious appeal. However, a critical question arises. While MAGA may have embraced Christian symbolism, does it truly align with Jesus' teachings? In the heart of Jesus' teachings lies an emphasis on love and compassion. His message was simple yet profound: love your neighbor as yourself. This principle was not limited to just those who were like us, but extended to everyone, including strangers and even enemies. Moreover, Jesus taught about forgiveness. He encouraged us to forgive others, just as we would want to be forgiven. He said, "Forgive and you will be forgiven." This was not a conditional offer. It was a call to let go of resentment and anger, to make room for love and healing. Additionally, Jesus' teachings highlighted the importance of serving others, especially the poor and marginalized. He himself led by example, washing the feet of his disciples, a task typically assigned to the lowest servants. He fed the hungry, healed the sick, and spent time with those society had cast aside. Jesus taught us that true greatness comes not from power or wealth, but from serving others. Furthermore, Jesus advocated for peace and nonviolence. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." He taught us to turn the other cheek, to respond to aggression, not with more aggression, but with love and understanding. These teachings of Jesus, love, forgiveness, service, and peace, are universal. They transcend boundaries of race, religion, and nationality. They call us to be better, to do better, to treat each other with kindness and respect. Jesus' teachings offer a stark contrast to the divisive and exclusionary rhetoric often associated with MAGA. Let's delve into the major areas where the MAGA movement's actions and rhetoric seem to clash with the teachings of Jesus. First, consider the MAGA movement's focus on power and dominance. This is a stark contrast to Jesus' teachings of humility and servant leadership. Jesus taught his followers to be humble, saying in Matthew chapter 23, verse 12, "Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." On the other hand, the MAGA movement often touts power, dominance, and winning at all costs. Secondly, the MAGA movement has been characterized by divisive and exclusionary rhetoric. This is in stark contrast to Jesus' teachings of love, unity, and inclusion. In the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 34, Jesus said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." However, the MAGA movement has often been marked by rhetoric that has divided people along lines of race, nationality, and political affiliation. Lastly, let's consider the MAGA movement's disregard for the poor and marginalized. Jesus, on the other hand, had a special concern for the poor and marginalized, teaching his followers to care for them. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 34 to 40, Jesus describes the final judgment, saying the righteous will be those who fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and welcomed the stranger. However, the MAGA movement has often prioritized wealth and power, seemingly forgetting the biblical tradition of caring for the least among us. The disparity between MAGA and Jesus' teachings is clear, but why does this matter? This question takes us to the heart of the issue. When political movements claim to represent religious values but act contrary to those values, it can lead to confusion, division, and even violence. This is not just about politics, but about the integrity of faith and the well-being of our communities. The disconnect between MAGA and Jesus' teachings has significant implications. This misalignment isn't just a theological discrepancy, it's a critical issue with real-world consequences. One of the most troubling outcomes is the manipulation of religious sentiment for political gain. When religious beliefs are co-opted to serve a political agenda, they can be distorted to justify actions that go against the core principles of that faith. For instance, the notion of Christian nationalism that has been linked with the MAGA movement merges American and far-right Christian identities, seeking to establish a theocratic Christian nation where only conservative Christians hold power. This is a far cry from Jesus' teachings of love, acceptance, and peace. Another consequence of this misalignment is the spread of misinformation. A case in point is the stolen election narrative that has been widely promoted by some MAGA supporters, despite a lack of credible evidence. Misinformation not only erodes trust in democratic institutions but also fuels social division, creating a climate of hostility and suspicion. The potential for violence is yet another disturbing fallout. When political ideologies are cloaked in religious rhetoric, they can incite extreme actions in the name of defending one's faith. This was tragically evident in the Capitol insurrection, where some participants believed they were fighting a holy war. Moreover, this misalignment creates a distorted image of Christianity, which can alienate those who might be seeking spiritual solace or guidance. When Christianity is equated with a particular political stance, it can become inaccessible to those who don't share that stance. This undermines the universal message of love and acceptance that Jesus preached. In conclusion, the co-opting of Jesus' teachings for political gain undermines the fundamental principles of Christianity. It's vital to remember that faith and politics, while they can intersect, should not be conflated to the point where one is used to manipulate the other. After all, Jesus himself said, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." Recent events have brought the contrast between MAGA and Jesus' teachings into sharp focus. Consider the opposition to debt forgiveness. When President Biden announced student debt forgiveness, it was met with resistance from some quarters, with accusations of socialism and moral hazard. But let's pause and reflect for a moment. The concept of debt forgiveness isn't a radical new idea. In fact, it's deeply rooted in biblical teachings, such as the Jubilee tradition, which Jesus embraced. This tradition saw debt forgiveness as necessary to keep society functioning, a far cry from the cries of socialism we hear today. Next, we turn to the co-opting of religious ceremonies. Last Christmas, former President Donald Trump spoke at First Baptist Dallas, where the entire service revolved around his presence. The event resembled more of a political rally than a solemn religious gathering. This starkly contrasts with Jesus' teachings, which emphasize humility, servitude, and the spiritual over the material. Lastly, let's discuss the alliances being formed with far-right figures. The World Peace and Unification Sanctuary Church, led by Sean Moon, heavily incorporates guns into their religious ceremonies and has formed alliances with prominent far-right figures. This is a far cry from Jesus' message of peace, love, and turning the other cheek. These events are not mere anomalies. They are part of a broader trend that sees political ideologies, in this case MAGA, directly contradicting the teachings of Jesus. In each instance, we see a clear divergence from the principles Jesus taught and lived by. These events underscore the need for discernment and critical thinking in aligning political beliefs with religious convictions. As we move forward, it's essential to remember that political affiliations and religious beliefs should not be blindly intertwined. Instead, they should be examined critically, ensuring they align with the values and principles we hold dear. The intersection of MAGA and Jesus' teachings raises important questions. As we've journeyed through this discourse, we've explored the genesis of MAGA, its religious undertones, and its appeal to the Christian right. We've seen how this political movement has leveraged religious imagery and rhetoric to galvanize its base, often blurring the line between politics and faith. We've contrasted this with the teachings of Jesus, a figure who stood for compassion, humility, and justice. Jesus, who was not a politician but a spiritual guide, emphasized love for one's neighbor, care for the poor, and forgiveness of debt. He refused earthly authority and did not engage in political violence. His teachings are a far cry from the MAGA narrative that often promotes division, wealth defense, and the rejection of debt forgiveness. In our comparison of MAGA and Jesus' teachings, we've seen a stark contrast. The alliance of MAGA leaders with religious figures and the co-opting of religious imagery for political gain stands in opposition to the principles Jesus espoused. The consequences of this misalignment are far-reaching, from the erosion of the separation between church and state to the potential for real-world violence. Recent events have further exposed this misalignment. The co-opting of Christmas services for political rallies, the glorification of guns in religious ceremonies, and the propagation of false narratives have all been justified under the banner of MAGA, even while contradicting Jesus' teachings. In the end, it is up to each individual to determine the compatibility of their political beliefs with their religious convictions. It is essential, though, to engage in critical thinking, to question, and to seek truth. As we navigate the complex landscape of faith and politics, let us remember the values of compassion, humility, and justice that Jesus taught and strive to uphold these in our own lives.
We are constantly making new content to help you on your walk of faith. Please like and subscribe to make sure you stay up to date with the latest content.